Hello and welcome to Technically Speaking, where scientists and engineers come together to chat about a common interest, share knowledge and satisfy some curiosity. I'm Laura and I'm joined by Ellie and Jasmin to talk about wildlife, how human activity affects it and whether we should be helping it. Now Ellie, you're a zoologist and you've worked on some wildlife filming in the past, so do you have a fun fact about wildlife habitats to share with us?
Oh, I'm sure I could think of quite a few. I think because you mentioned my filming past, it'd be quite nice to mention one of those. So I worked on a show called Secret Life of the Zoo, and they had lots of habitats, obviously, for lots of their animals. And the one I liked the most was the elephant pool at Chester Zoo, because it is, unsurprisingly, a baby elephant deep, if not even deeper. I never tested it myself, but I saw several times the baby elephants playing in there and being fully submerged, which I didn't realise was possible. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a baby elephant deep, but I can't imagine them, crouching down, so I imagine the water is just that deep or deeper. And it was absolutely adorable and a highlight of the experience.
Can elephants swim?
Yes.
Or are they too... Oh, okay.
Very well.
Not too unwieldy. Fair enough. Because I just have this image of these baby elephants just kind of swimming around when they're sort of snorkeling with their trunk.
Yeah, they did that. That was so cute. I mean, baby elephants, there's a few things cuter, to be honest. And them playing together in the water, squatting each other, being snorkels, just adorableness all round.
So I'm guessing it was deliberate to make it that deep. Like Chester Zoo actually thought about how these animals interact in the wild and what do they need.
I would have thought so, because it's like they care so deeply about their animals, and you obviously have to plumb it in and takes many millions of pounds to build that sort of thing. So I'm sure there would have been a consultation at some point, potentially even with other zoos, though I don't know for sure about how deep the elephant pool needed to be.
No, I am wondering now, why do baby elephants necessarily need to do that? Other than they enjoy it, it makes them happy.
I think it's happiness, yeah. I mean, I guess they don't need an elephant pool, but if you've got the capacity to put an elephant pool in, why wouldn't you? It makes their visitors happy too, so then it's win-win all round.
But exactly, if it's as entertaining as you say, then everyone wins, yeah. And it's kind of reminds me, talking about zoos, there was something in the news recently in the UK about an escaped capybara called Cinnamon that I think she escaped from a zoo.
She did. I love her. There's been so many zoo animals in the news recently, and Cinnamon she's up there top tier. But they have caught her. She's fine, she's back with her family.
Yeah, and you got to wonder why she did that. Like, was it just instinct to go for a wander, or was she really unhappy, or was she trying to find a mate or something? But I guess we might get into that when we get on to talking about what zoos and artificial habitats are about and whether they're... Jasmin, you're not a zoologist, so what's your interest in this?
So I have a really big interest in giant pandas, and giant pandas are one of the species where there is a lot of human interference, especially around how to conserve and increase the population in the wild. I consume so much panda content in my social media.
When you started saying the word consume, I did not expect it to go that way when you finished the sentence. But I don't necessarily know a lot about pandas. So could you give us a fact about pandas and their habitats to start us off?
They're on the more medium, small size of bears, and they're pretty heavy. Fully grown adults easily weigh over 100 kilos. They're different to other bears in that they are predominantly vegetarian. Specifically, they eat bamboo, so bamboo makes a really big chunk of their diet. So they spend a lot of time eating, because bamboo is really not nutritious at all.
I have heard this, and it does make me wonder if they really like eating bamboo, but it's not healthy, then why do they keep doing it, and should we really be helping them?
It is healthy for them. For a panda bear to have good gut health and digestion, they need to eat bamboo, specifically different types of bamboo, like leaves and stalks. So it is good for them because they've developed the enzymes and their gut needs to eat bamboo.
Okay.
It's literally all they eat, right? It's not like some species are like, oh yeah, they mostly eat salmon.
Yeah, it's over 90% of their diet. They will eat other stuff. So in the wild, they will scavenge, so they will eat any animals that they've just found dead. But in captivity, they will eat stuff like fruits and vegetables, as well as a very specific type of cake that is made for pandas. That's basically steamed flour, eggs, and honey.
Aw, little panda cakes. That sounds tasty. I mean, if you're eating bamboo all day, anything's got to be better, hasn't it? Surely they're sick of it by now.
Yeah, but they really enjoy eating it.
So they were classed as endangered, but are they not so much now? Is that right?
Yeah, they're not classified as endangered now. So in 2016, they were officially classed as vulnerable according to the IUCN's Red List. And in 2021, the Chinese authorities also then downgraded the classification to vulnerable from endangered.
And was that because of human intervention?
Yeah, it was basically because of human intervention. So in terms of like population numbers, in the 1980s, there were estimated to be around 1,000 pandas in the wild. But today, I say today, in like the latest count, which I think was in 2016, they're up to 1,864. So nearly a 100% increase in population.
So what was involved in making them just vulnerable?
It was a mixture of not destroying their habitat, but also there were some programs in China to basically breed pandas and then release them into the wild to also help boost population numbers. But that's only limited because you can only release so many pandas into the wild.
Were they ever hunted? I never remember this about pandas. Were people hunting them for food?
Pandas are not hunters. So pandas are one of the few animals who were never used in Chinese medicine, because Chinese medicine uses lots of different animals, different insects.
Right.
And actually, interesting fact is, because the panda bear is the national treasure, or one of the national treasures of China. So if you are caught poaching or killing a panda bear, it bears a really heavy sentence. In 2015, there were 3 men, I think, who were convicted of killing a panda, and I believe they were given a 10-year prison sentence. Depending on the circumstances, you could actually be given a life sentence in prison or even a death penalty for killing a panda.
I mean, I don't think anyone could bring themselves to kill a panda. I mean, unless I was being viciously attacked and it was self-defense. Because they got big teeth.
Are they at all aggressive? Like, if you encountered them in their habitat doing what they do and they didn't like you, would they have a go at you?
Panda bears are naturally very territorial and they're solitary. They also don't recognize humans. So this is a big difference between pandas in the wild versus pandas in captivity, is pandas in captivity are like used to humans because they have daily interactions with their caretakers, or nannies as we call them in China. But wild pandas, they do not know humans, and so if they see a human and you try to approach the panda bear will try to like scare you away by charging at you. They are heavy and they have really sharp claws. They're really strong because they eat bamboo, so a panda bear could easily maul a human if it wanted to.
Okay. See, I have an image in my head of a panda going, "Oh, what the hell's that? Oh, I don't like that. Go away."
It could
Scare
also
it off.
easily just run away from you.
Yeah, I was imagining male pandas like more territorial, but I still would choose to believe that they wouldn't attack me and I could just watch them quietly.
I think if they realise that you're not going to do anything to them, they're just like, okay, this thing that looks weird, and just walk away.
Are you calling me weird, Jasmine? Am I weird to a panda?
It sounds like pandas don't appreciate equality and diversity. Really. You don't look like me, no.
They also don't see very many things on their day-to-day life because they're so solitary
Okay.
and territorial.
This is more sad than I expected for the pandas. Like, I'm glad they're not endangered anymore, but they're living their sad, solitary lives, just eating one food source. I'm not coming back as a panda. It's not happening.
Panda in captivity, maybe, because they're really pampered.
That's true.
Some get massages.
They get massages. Is that safe?
And why?
Yeah, they're going to this panda spa. Are they really stressed?
Because the panda likes it. So this is mostly for female pandas who've had cubs. So they get really stressed when they're trying to raise their kids. To help the mother panda cope with raising her kids, they'll give her massages.
That's unexpected.
They get treated better than humans.
They do,
To
for
most
sure.
women, it's like, yeah, childbirth's a perfectly normal, natural thing, even though it's one of the most risky things a person can do.
Yeah, and pandas, when they've given birth, like, they're given, like, 24-hour, like, they have multiple nannies, essentially. So, like, if the panda mother will let the humans take the baby, the humans will actually look after the baby while the mum naps and eats.
I can't believe there's panda childcare. That's unbelievable. Living in some sort of facility, zoo, maybe not be so bad then if you've got an artificial habitat, you've got round-the-clock carers. Maybe it's a good thing. I mean, there are artificial habitats like all across the world that we've created to help like different wildlife as well, aren't there? Because there's artificial reefs to help like marine species recover from all the horrible things we've done to their habitat in the name of fishing and trawling and digging up the bottom of the ocean.
I like the sound of this. I've been to a few zoos, and although I get that they're very good at educating the public about nature and conservation, I just don't really like wandering around seeing all these animals in captivity, even though they may be better there. So what about this artificial reef thing, which I've also not seen because I'm not a diver?
No, I'm not a diver. I'd like to be a diver, but it scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
They've done loads of studies on artificial reefs and all sorts of things. There was one where they helped marine populations recover, and they did a survey pre-reef, and there were about 44 species. and then post-reef, increasing as much as 193 species after 1 year deployment, all living in that area. So they really provided them with somewhere to live and make their little fishy homes, I guess.
So they increased the, at least the diversity, I guess. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily know if it's total population increase, if it's just more species.
Yeah. Presumably it would be, just because if you've only got 44 species, even if you've got loads of those species, to have even more species, surely it's going to increase total population. And then after 2 years, it was 237 species. So a big win all round, I feel, for artificial reefs.
So how did they go about constructing it? These was it researchers that were doing it?
It was researchers, and they constructed 500 cylindrical shaped artificial reefs, and then they put them in about 1.5 kilometres square in Vietnamese coastal area, and that was to provide an alternative habitat to recover natural resources that had been lost due to inshore fishing.
That sounds like some science I would like to do, rather than being in a lab doing stuff with glassware and petri dishes and whatever else. Getting out into the wild and learning to dive, presumably, is part of your job.
To go scuba diving and doing marine surveys does sound like quite good fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the decline was because of fishing, so I presume one reason for doing it was to improve the catch from fisherfolk, I guess. I don't want to say fishermen.
Fishers, I think, is what we're going for just gender neutral.
So then they'd have more income coming in, and then, again, everyone wins, as long as you don't start overfishing, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the problem was that people realised you could make money out of fish, and then obviously Classic went overboard with over-commercialisation and then just destroyed the habitat, and then obviously you don't have any fish anymore, so that was clearly a bad idea. But yes, I suppose inevitably, if you boost population numbers and you boost where they're living, then I guess you might be able to boost local economies from then having more catch again. Or you could do the nice thing, which is like ecotourism, and take people scuba diving, which I think might be better, but I appreciate that you have to make a living somehow.
Yeah, I wonder about that though. So tourism also has its downsides, doesn't it? Like it puts too much pressure on local resources, and tourists can just be
horrible,
scruffy, to be honest, and leave litter everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned before about the how cinnamon was like part of those internet animals. And it's like, you guys have heard of Mu Deng?
Yeah, the baby hippo.
And the tourists are going to see her in Thailand. And yeah, throwing things at her to make her move. So yeah, tourists are bad.
Yeah.
Why are they going all that way to see one particular hippo? Why that hippo and not others?
She is a baby pygmy hippo, and she is an icon. An internet sensation.
There's a makeup tutorial based on Mudang, so you can...
Her peachy skin tones.
She's also a meme just for her facial expressions.
She's like constantly screaming and biting her zookeepers.
Yeah.
So people just decided to make her famous to essentially make more money?
It wasn't the intention, it was just her, one of her keepers just decided to like post about her on social media, and then because she's cute, she became really famous, because it's similar with some panda bears. Because there are some that are like viral celebrities.
I think social media's got a lot to answer for in this, because they were never there were never celebrity animals that weren't like in shows when I was a kid. I don't remember them just being famous for being themselves.
Some zoos like do have like a celebrity animal. Yeah. I think in the Japanese zoo there was like a celebrity gorilla, because he liked to play with his children. Basically, animals that do funny stuff become celebrities.
So I feel like in that context of zoo animals being made into celebrities, we're kind of saying that those artificial environments aren't necessarily very beneficial for them if people are throwing things at them to make them do something.
I mean, that is bad. I mean, like I was saying before when I worked on Secret Life, there are a lot of artificial habitats that are very good, and the keepers put a lot of time and energy into making them as good as they can be for the species that live there. And it is a commonly held fact that species in captivity live longer than species in the wild, and that might be because they're not being eaten by other animals, but it's also because they get veterinary care and dentists and don't have to fend for themselves every day. There's actually a study that I was looking at. 80% of all the mammal species they studied, including carnivores, live longer in captivity, which was especially true for smaller species with shorter lifespans and higher mortality rates in the wild. So it might not be a perfect solution, but it does help for sure. And it helps conservation massively.
I think the same also applies to house pets. A house cat who doesn't leave the house will live longer than a cat that's allowed to go outside, just because there's more dangers.
Well, yeah, I suppose you take out the risks, right? If you go outside, you could be killed by a dog, or you could be hit by a car, or get into a fight with something else.
That has to be the ultimate artificial habitat, because a cat left in the wild, or it wouldn't look like a house cat anyway, because I guess they've been adapted from people taking them in to use them to do things. That sounds wrong.
Use them to catch mice.
Exactly, that was the original point, wasn't it? That there was a benefit to the two species living and working together, and they gradually became pets. Same like dogs used to be used for hunting and various other activities that were co-beneficial.
Yeah.
And now my dog just kind of lies on a chair having a nap.
I love the idea that Laura's house is the ultimate artificial habitat. It doesn't have to be a rugged, wild environment, because also for a dog, obviously they've been through domestication, right? They're not expecting to be living in Alaska like with the wolves or anything like that. So it is slightly different.
The way most pets have been bred, they wouldn't really be able to survive in the wild anyway. Like the ones that have got like lots of fur that would get really matted, there wouldn't be a lot of benefit to having that in the wild, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. We've definitely bred them to suit our lives. But there are artificial habitats within like people's homes and gardens, like bug hotels, bird boxes in their gardens. Like that counts as an artificial habitat for sure.
Yeah, so you were talking about artificial roofs, and we kind of then went back on to talking about zoos. I don't think we've really discussed in a lot of detail the ideas behind what counts as an artificial habitat. You could say that me just chucking a load of sticks on the floor in my garden was an artificial habitat because they wouldn't be there otherwise. But is that particularly beneficial?
It depends if anything moves in. There is a suggestion that you should make log piles in your garden for like mice and woodlice and insects. So yeah, I guess in a way that is an artificial habitat that could benefit something. But if you're just literally putting two twigs together, then probably not.
Like a pigeon making a nest.
I mean, maybe. If the pigeon then lays an egg there, maybe you have benefited some wildlife.
But I feel like as a scientist that cares about conservation, you would want to figure out the best way of designing a habitat for the particular species of interest, and that will vary from animal to animal. And I was reading a study from a few years ago about garden birds and how it's possible that all the bird feeders that people have in their gardens might have a detrimental effect because certain species are using them more than others, which has a knock-on effect for the wider species. I think it was specific about blue tits, and they were going out and potentially taking other habitat from birds that aren't as bossy as they are. I find this odd because they're definitely bottom of the chain in my garden.
Yeah.
They'll hang around waiting for a gap on the feeder because there are goldfinches and sparrows that are just mean.
Yeah, I was going to say the robin rules the roost in my garden. He bullies all the other birds.
Yeah, robins are super territorial.
See, I've never seen that with any of our robins. They all seem to get along.
That's very unusual.
All right, I've got the weird ones. I see.
Yeah, it's a funny one, garden birds. I think it's almost, I was going to say domestication, but it's too far gone, isn't it? Because people feed birds because they think it's nice, and it does help them. But then there's the thing about over-reliance, and then are you altering the ecosystem too much, and all that stuff. But birds are in decline. Like, we've had terrible losses of birds, so I think maybe we should be doing all we can to keep them happy.
Well, this is the reason that I started doing it, and I kind of feed them fairly sporadically so they don't get used to relying on this one food source, because if we go on holiday for 2 weeks, then some might die, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because something will eat them. They're part of a food chain. But I still don't like the thought of it.
No, I don't like the thought of it either.
I work near Kensington Gardens, and in there a lot of people feed the birds, especially the parakeets. But because a lot of the like nuts and other stuff that people try to feed the birds ends up on the floor, it attracts a lot of rats. So that's why there's always signs around the park saying, don't feed the birds.
Oh, and I guess there aren't necessarily a lot of predators for rats in an urban area.
Well, there's urban foxes. But you had rats, didn't you, Laura?
We've had wild rats coming into the garden. I also have pet rats. They're very different.
What artificial habitat did you create for them?
For the pets?
Yeah.
They're in a cage that has the right bar spacing and is big enough for them or whatever else. And in the evening we put up this massive playpen, and there are loads of boxes and things for them to explore in the pens. They can spend hours running around if they want. The girls that we had, I had them from they were about 4 weeks old, I think. They ran around like crazy. The boys that I have now, that I have had since they were 8 months old, they're rescue brats. They don't really do much.
You got all this like jungle gym equipment for the rats and they don't care.
Yeah, squirrels definitely don't like socializing. They're always fighting over food or trying to run away from someone else if they think another squirrel is trying to take their food.
There was a news article about a squirrel on a train recently. It was grey squirrel, so I'm not particularly excited by it because they're invasive to the UK. But I did wonder, why was it on that train?
Where was it going?
Yeah, was it trying to travel somewhere else to find some food, or was it just looking for a warm place because it couldn't find somewhere?
I reckon it didn't have a concept of the fact that the train would then transport it from one place to another. I reckon it was an accidentally wandered on situation.
Don't you also sometimes get pigeons wandering onto trains?
But I can see a pigeon being used to being around people and kind of being stupid enough to just accidentally end up there. But a squirrel seems like it has more intent to me from the ones that I've seen in the park.
You reckon it's planning a nice day trip?
I mean, some of them are used to people feeding them, aren't they? 'Cause I used to do this in the park in Greenwich, down London. But I can't see them being that used to being around people. So maybe it was looking for somewhere warm for the night for some reason.
The ones in Kensington Gardens are definitely used to humans. Like, if they see a human that's giving out food, they all come up to you and take the food from your hands.
Yeah, I think some are very habituated.
I guess the question is, should they, especially grey squirrels that aren't meant to be in the UK, and create problems for the native red squirrels?
I mean, realistically, if we were being true conservationists, we'd shoot all the grey squirrels.
Some people do that as well.
That is very dark.
It is dark. I mean, they shouldn't be here, and they have almost wiped out the populations of red squirrels in the UK, which is now like maybe 3 or 4 populations still going in the UK. But it does seem very cruel that we would have to wipe them out to get the reds back.
And there are different ways of doing it, aren't there? Like, there's a contraceptive drug, I guess, that they put on food. I've heard about this being developed so that the grey squirrels won't be able to procreate, but it shouldn't affect the reds.
Oh, I've not heard that, but I like that as an idea to just sort of slowly wheedle out the population. But you'd have to get so many squirrels to take it. Surely that's not scale-upable.
Well, if everyone's feeding them.
No, maybe. We'll start with Jasmin's Kensington population.
Yeah, start with those. I saw like at least 12 when I went for a walk earlier today.
I do see squirrels probably every day.
Oh, I don't see as many around here. I live in a rural area. We definitely have reds, though.
That's better.
There you go. I wonder what the difference is. It can't just be urban environments.
Well, it's probably availability of resources, other species. I guess London is a very easy place to get food.
Well, this is the kind of the theme of the episode, isn't it? Humans have had such a big effect on the natural world by getting rid of lots of habitat through building houses and farming activities. Because I think there's a statistic when we were talking about bird population declines that farmland birds have decreased in population numbers by about 60% since 1970, which I think is quite scary. And that's because of changes in farming practices.
Yeah. That is scary. Well, you think how much farming would have evolved in that time as well. Like, it's all about how much money you can make, how much land you need. People are taking out hedgerows, like that's a big problem. So they can obviously make bigger land areas for crops and stuff. If you've got a huge tractor, you don't necessarily need a hedgerow in the middle, and then you've destroyed an entire habitat in one fell swoop, which is awful. But there are subsidies and things like that. Like, the government does provide, like, what do they call it, like nature-friendly farming. There's like an official term for it, where you leave like a strip all along the edge of your field, or you leave the hedgerows in and something like that.
But I think that also points out how reliant we are on the natural world as well. If our food comes from the environment around us, whether it's intensively farmed or not, you still have to have that interaction with it. So you can't just do whatever you want and expect things to be okay.
You can't also blame farmers either, because they're just trying to make a living. Like, it's not their fault that, you know, they need to grow this land. Like, we're all eating it. We're eating the food that they make. We still need to feed everyone. So it is a very delicate balance of, like, well, we want the birds and we want the animals to have a home, but also we still need to grow crops and we need to make a living.
And the garden bird study that I was reading that talked about specific, I think it was willow tits and marsh tits, whose populations could be affected by the slightly mean blue tits. Maybe there'll just be more specific feeders for those types of birds. They can also survive as well. I guess you'd have to look in detail at the different needs that they have, like how their beaks are adapted to pick different foods, or how they make use of different habitats for nesting.
Yeah, it's all interrelated, isn't it? Like, the ecology, if we've destroyed the habitat and then they've got no, let's say they eat insects for want of a better idea, then you can see how they're not thriving. But if we can replace some of that with these artificial things, even if it's just a bird feeder in your garden, then at least you're contributing in some way. Like, we know the populations are going down. At least we're doing something about it.
And I also wonder, like, evolution takes quite a long time, right? So I'm going to keep mentioning these marsh tits because I don't know a lot about them, but they obviously exist for a reason. They're related to blue tits, but they've differentiated in some way. They specialize in something the blue tit doesn't. How long did it take for that adaptation to become embedded and for them to become a new species? And how long would it take them to then adapt to what humans are doing?
I wouldn't know, to be honest. I would say thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, if not potentially even longer than that, to be a new species entirely. But having said that, you can have small subpopulations that become genetically distinct quicker because of not having so much inflow and outflow of genes. And then generationally, blue tits, they live like max 10 years, probably? Something like that. That's my best guess. So then you would see changes, even albeit very slowly, in the population. But you still need years and years and years to make it work, right?
Blue tits tend to live for around 3 years. However, the longevity record is 10 years and 3 months, according to BBC Wildlife magazine.
So Ellie was spot on with max 10 years.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying that human behaviour, human activity is making change much more rapidly than evolution could cope with.
Yes.
So there's pretty much a need to either think very carefully about any future activity, or, as we talked about with having artificial habitats, to work to undo whatever changes we've made.
Well, it's like when you go back to the artificial reefs and fishing, a lot of people now have realised how damaging that is. And there are laws in place, there are marine protected areas where you can't fish. People are coming round to the fact that actually completely destroying the oceans is quite a bad idea. But again, in terms of change is slow, it's also slow in a human world, right? We might know these things, but getting that into policy, getting that into governments, getting people to care is very, very difficult, especially when it might impact profits, which seem to be the one thing that people do care about.
I feel like there needs to be something that changes that, because you hear that a lot, and I don't necessarily know how true it is, but I feel like there should be something where profit is intrinsically linked to making the world a better place.
That would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could push that agenda instead of let's use up all the Earth's resources and destroy all the habitats. But I mean, it is a balance, and I keep saying this, but the world is not the same as it was however many hundreds of years ago. We do have many more people, we do have much more technology, we do need infrastructure, and then on top of that, yes, we need to keep the species alive. Like, even as a conservationist, I can appreciate that most people's priority is themselves and the human race versus all of these species that are going extinct. But we should do more, and we can do more, and things like wildlife-friendly farming should be more of a priority. We don't have to use these massive industrial systems to get the food that we need.
No, see, I would quite like to imagine, I do imagine a future where walking down the street, it's not unusual to see a red squirrel or a particular type of bird. It's just common. You don't stand there going, oh my God, look at that bird's amazing. I've never seen one of those before. It's just common that we live with wildlife. Maybe not pandas, I guess, unless they do get used to meeting us.
No, they're very solitary.
Yeah, but you'd like to think if you went for a remote hike in the Chinese countryside, you could come across a panda, like if you went hiking in America, you could come across a black bear.
Yeah, I think if I saw a panda, I'd probably just look at it and then walk away.
I would die trying to cuddle it.
Smothered to death by a panda.
What a way to go. I'm joking, of course. I would leave it well alone.
Respect the panda.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably quite a good place to leave it on that positive future outlook. So I feel like I've summed this up briefly about 5 or 10 minutes ago. We're basically saying that humans have done terrible things to the earth. We've said this before. And we kind of need to maintain a balance with nature because we rely on it so much. And it's a nice thing to be involved with. So if there are ways to make nature part of our normal day-to-day life, then we should. But it also sounds like more research is needed to understand exactly what that looks like, and we could end up with highly specialized products you can buy for any species you might want to encourage into your local environment. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you in a few weeks for another episode. And if you like this, please check out our back catalogue. And we would very much appreciate it if you'd leave us a bit of a tip in our tip jar. The link to that is on our bio. The views expressed in this podcast belong entirely to the person that said them. They do not represent any industry or organisation. If you enjoyed listening to these views, it would really help us out if you could rate us, leave a review and tell a friend. This podcast was sponsored by no one, but if you're interested in funding us to continue to have frank discussions about science and engineering, please get in touch.